And welcome again to your next economics class. And today, what we are going to see is another topic, that is price elasticity of demand. So some of the things which we are going to learn today, and most probably this will continue on our Monday lesson as well. Today, our main objective is to see that how price elasticity of demand is actually, how do we define it, and how what kind of values do we get when we calculate it, the demand and supply. And at the same time, we will see that what are the different methods through which we could calculate it. So before we start today's lesson, I have just drawn these three curves before you, which you could see on the whiteboard. You may see that there are three curves, and apparently it seems like that all these three diagrams belongs to demand. It's a demand curve. Now, but the difference which you will see is that the shapes are a little different. Now, let's assume this is diagram 1, this is diagram 2, and this is diagram 3. Why we are calling them demand? Since the relationship is very much clear. If the price is changing, it's affecting the quantity demand. And I have symbolized them with the letter P and Q. So you could see that the price P1 and P2, if it increases, it's very natural that it's going to reduce from Q1 to Q2. And same is happening over here and in the diagram number 3. But the only difference which we see is that when the price is changing, you could see that the price is changing with the same size. The price is like from P1 to P2. This is the same, this change is as same as in this diagram, and change as in this diagram are the same. But the only difference which we see is in the quantities. The quantities are varying. We could see that in this diagram 1, the quantity demand is decreasing or increasing, which is equal to the change in the price. But in this diagram 2, you can see the price is changing more as compared to the change in quantity demand. But in the last diagram, diagram number 3, you could see that the price is increasing or decreasing from P1 to P2 or P2 to P1. But there is a huge difference or change in the quantity. Now, this is where we have one question in our mind, that why this is so. The only answer is that actually these three diagrams in which demand is changing in with this variation, it's just because of one word, that it's actually the response. The response of demand. The response is different in all these three diagrams. Why it's different? It's different just because of the change in prices? No, it's actually due to some factors. There are certain commodities which have maybe this type of response. Might be some products which might have this type of response. And there might be some products which have a huge response due to the change in prices. Now, why they are changing this rapidly? Yes, the answer is going to be in our next lesson, when we will find out what are the various factors and determinants of those elasticity. But for today's lesson, we're just going to find out what shapes of the elasticity demand curves are, and how do we calculate them, and what are the various range or level of elasticities. So we could describe either it is elastic, inelastic, or whatever. Now, starting with the explaining them, that if this is all about the response, the very first thing which should come in our mind, that how to define it. To define it, you need to use the word which we have already put it on the board, that is response. So what we are looking over here, we are looking into a response, or let's say it's actually the responsiveness of quantity demand. And why this response is changing? Obviously, it's due to the price. Since it's changing due to the price, that's why we are giving the name to this topic as price elasticity of demand. So it means that if the demand is changing due to some other factors, maybe the income, maybe prices of the related goods, that might have a different terminology. Perhaps if it's due to the change in income, we can say it's price elasticity of income, or income elasticity of demand. But since it's not in our syllabus, so we are not going to go further in detail. Let's focus on the price elasticity of demand at the moment. So it's all about that responsiveness of the quantity demand due to the change in prices. Now, so after having these curves, are these the only three responses which we learn? There are two more. But before we go with these two demand curves, we need to highlight that what are these types of elasticity. Now, if you can see in this diagram one, in this diagram, the price is changing with the same magnitude or same size, and it has effect the quantity demand to change in the same manner. So it means when both are equal, we usually give this name as a unitary elastic. Now in this diagram, the response is very low due to the change in price. So we can say when the price is increasing and there is a very less response, the elasticity is little less. So let's say we can use its less elastic demand curve. In this last diagram 3, the price is changing with the same as in this diagram and like in this diagram. But the quantity is rapidly changing. It's showing more response. So we can use the term that this is actually an elastic demand curve. So unitary elastic demand, less elastic demand curve, and last is the elastic demand curve. So these are the three different types, but as I mentioned you, that these are the three responses due to the change in prices. But sometimes we see some exceptional or some special type of demand curve, which we see in these diagrams. I've just put it on the board below these diagrams. So in these diagrams, you can see this is a special kind of demand curve where the price is not changing, but maybe on this price, there would be different demand. Maybe the demand is increasing or decreasing. So in this diagram, we see that this is more responsive as compared to this diagram. So this is known as a perfectly elastic demand curve. This diagram, the last one, is extremely vertical. So since this was less elastic, this is showing even more less responsive in change in quantity demand. So if the price increases or decreases, the demand remains the same. So this type of elasticity of demand would be known as perfectly inelastic or perfectly less elastic curves or demand. So dear students, normally if somebody asks that what type of elasticity or what are the different levels of elasticity do we have? Yes, we have 5 different levels of elasticity. So putting up all these values together and what values we can calculate, yes, for that we need to move on to our next level. And that is that how we could calculate it. Like if we just want to find out that why this is equal, or if the answer is coming equal to 1, then it has to be unitary. But what about this diagram? What value do we got for this? Is it like greater than 1 or less than 1? Then we have to calculate that as well. If we want to find out the elasticity of this demand curve, then we need to know that what value we will get for this and what we will get for this diagram and this diagram. For that, we need to find out some formulas, some methods through which we could calculate it. So let's do it. Now to find the elasticity, either it's elastic or inelastic, we have popularly 3 methods in our syllabus, and we will try to focus on 2 today. So you could do your worksheet during the weekend. So the very first method is the formula method. The formula method is very simple. You could just put the values or make a notion of this formula like quantity demand over price divided with quantity demand over price. I hope it's not that difficult to learn, but only one thing has to be added on this part of this formula. We're just going to put this sign. I hope you are familiar with this. It's known as delta sign. The delta means change. The change in 2 values, or maybe the difference in both values. All right. And when we show the word letter P, that stands for price, and QD stands for quantity demand. Okay, so how are we going to use this formula over here? Like this is quantity demand. For this, we need to find out some information which might be given to us in the books, in questions, or maybe in the examination. And they may be in a form of a schedule, maybe a graph. So we will start with the schedule first, and we'll put up some values and find out how we can calculate it. So I have just worked these examples for you in another over here. Now, considering this formula, this is one of the table which is giving us two informations in rows. We have price and quantity demand. The price is increasing from 5 to 10, and the quantity demand is increasing from 10 to 5. This is very natural, which we learn. But in this type of change in quantity demand, due to the change in price, is giving us some result. What is that? We are going to put up in the formula, but before we do that, let's find out where to find the delta P. Now we need to find out the delta P and delta Q first. You could see that this is delta P, which is minus 5. How did we get it? When we subtract 5 out of 10, that is the delta value, change value. So when it's we get the change minus 5. Why? Because it's subtracted from 10. So we get the answer minus 5. Now what is price over here? Price is the original price, which you could see on this side. So this price is actually this one. And this delta P is actually -5. And now, in the term of quantity demand is 10 over here, the original quantity. And the original price of P is eventually, that is 5. Or delta Q is, is 5. So putting up all these values, we get the answer minus 0.5. Now, what this 0.5 stands for and how to depict it. Number one. Now, this value is obviously less than 1. Any value which is usually less than 1 is known as less elastic demand curve. So, in such diagram, when or any table or any information where the price or the result is less than 1 is going to be known as less elastic. Moving to another example, we have another table on this side. You could see the price is actually increasing from 10 to 12. It's a very slight change in price, but there's a huge difference in the quantity demand. So if we just calculate as per the formula which we discussed, we get the answer -2. Now, how did we get the -2? You can calculate at your own and you will find the answer will always come in negatives with the negative sign. Now, how to depict this one, this answer? Is it elastic or is it inelastic? This is a very important thing to understand right now. So most of you might be thinking that this might be, since it's less than 1, it should be inelastic. But that's not the answer actually. The answer is that it is actually elastic. How come? Now, this negative sign is usually suggested by the economist that it has to be ignored while explaining the elasticity of any product. Because this negative sign actually shows the relationship between price and quantity demand. And we know it has a negative relationship. It has an inverse relationship. So any inverse relationship will always bring us a negative sign with any value. So it doesn't mean that all the values which we attain after calculating with this formula are all inelastic. That is not possible. What we need to do, we have to take this point into consideration. Ignoring this sign, we will depict that which elasticity is. Now, if we now ignore sign, minus sign, the answer is 2. So can you guess, is it elastic or inelastic? Yes, it is elastic. And an elastic curve is eventually the one where the answer is greater than 1. So, a less elastic, we could also show that the price elasticity of demand is less than 1. But in elastic demand curve, we could also note it as that the price elasticity of demand is greater than 1. So, the formula method is very simple before us through which we could calculate elasticity by putting the values from any table, or maybe a graph is given to you and some values are put on it, and you can simply calculate and find elasticity. If it's elastic, inelastic, or unit elastic, or if it's like perfectly elastic, or if it's perfectly less elastic. Okay. Now, let's take some of the examples without the table right now. Now, this is something which we have learned, that the price elasticity demand is less than 1. This is price elasticity demand is greater than 1. What about the unity elastic demand curve? The unity elastic demand curve is usually considered as it is equal to 1. While calculating with any table, and if the answer is attained, let's say 1, or let's say -1, the price elasticity demand is going to be known as unity. Now, sometimes if the price elasticity, what about this curve? What kind of value we will get for this demand curve? Let's make a table first of all. Let's say if the price is remaining the same and the quantity demand is, let's say, changing from 5 to 10, we can put up P like 5 over here. Let's put 5 over here and 10 over here. Now, if the price remains the same, the quantity is increasing or either decreasing. So how and what value we will get out of this? So if we just put up in the formula, the price is not changing, and we know the price is always set in the denominator. Yes. So let's say the price is not changing, it will, so we will have value 0 over here. And let's say the price is changing, quantity is changing from 5 to 10, it's 5. Then the answer should be, yes, students, what should be? Okay, I know that some of you might be thinking that it should be 0, but it's not true. You can calculate, and in your calculator, you might be getting a word stated mathematical error. So it's not the error, actually due to in the maths, when any value divided with 0, the answer is infinite. The answer is infinite. So the elasticity of demand, we could show this way. So anywhere you find that the price elasticity demand is equal to infinite sign, it means that it is actually a perfectly elastic demand curve. Okay, let's take another example. Let's say the price is changing, but the quantity demand remains the same. Now let's say the price remains the same. Sorry, price is changing. The quantity is remaining the same as 5. So if 5 is not changing, we will put the quantity demand in the numerator as 0. And the price, since it's changing from 2 to 5, let's put the 3 over here. So any value dividing the 0 will give the answer 0. So price elasticity of demand is going to be 0. So dear students, what do we learn right now over here? Can we like just arrange them, that what type of elasticities do we get now and how we could calculate it? There's one simple way which I usually explain to my students, and that is setting the ranges. Now we have almost 5 levels of elasticities, dear students. So let's put the word over here. And then we have an infinite over here, and we have 0 over here. It's just like a thermometer. So I usually name it an elastometer. So it's from 0 to 1 and 1 to infinite. So 3 values are here, and there are 2 more which are in between infinite and 1. And the other, and the last one is between 1 and 0. So how do we give the ranges? The very first, let's say if we start with 1, if any answers after calculating with the formula method or any other method, if the answer is 1, then it is going to be known as unitary elastic. Great. And let's say if it is equal to 0, then it should be perfectly less elastic. And if it's equal to infinite, it has to be perfectly elastic. So what about the 2 more? It's between infinite and 1. This is going to be, I'm going to put a bracket for it. So any value which falls between 1 and infinite is going to be known as elastic demand curve. And any value which we achieve between 1 and 0 is going to be less or inelastic demand curve. Now, can you guess what are the values which are between 1 and infinite, dear students? Yes, it might start from 1.1 to onward, but before infinite. And when we say the value is between 1 and 0, it should start from then 0.1 and so on till we get 1. So this is known as the range and level of elasticity, or the degrees of elasticity. A degree, just like a thermometer, which I said, it's starting from the 0 and it's moving upward. Now, what are the things which we need to learn? If somebody asks you, what is if the elasticity is 0.1? If you don't want to use these terms, yes, we can say if it is between 1 and 0, or if you can say if it is falling below 1, it is going to be known as that the elasticity of demand is actually lowering or reducing. And if it is increasing from 1 to infinite, or let's say from 0 to onward, this is going to be known as that the elasticity value is increasing. So increasing elasticity moving on to this side, and decreasing elasticity value is going to be on the lower side. Okay. So we're going to stop this lesson right now over here. If you have any question, you may ask us today. And there is one link topic to it, which I'm going to continue on Monday, inshallah. Since we have a little short time, we have to manage the lesson in 30 minutes. So that's why I couldn't explain you completely. I hope if there are any questions, you can ask me in another 5 minutes. Thank you very much.